Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Bar podcast. I'm your host, Denisa Tova, and today I have the absolute pleasure of chatting with Michele Kern-Rappy. She's a legal dynamo. She's an attorney, highly experienced mediator. She's a creator of a mediation program at the Supreme Court of New York. Just a really high caliber person. Now, but outside of the law, Michele has had a life filled with yoga, mentoring, and even a reality TV adventure. So, Michele, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Denisa. I'm so delighted to be here.
We chatted a little bit, and the beauty of this podcast is really for me also to get to know you better, as well as, of course, our viewers, our audience. So I know um, that your interest in law started at a very young age. Can you share how that early experience shaped your career path and in law and mediation back then?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. So, my dad worked as a clerk at the courthouse at 60 Center Street. And before you had Take Your Child to Work Day, he was taking me in to work. I was a child who had some childhood illnesses and missed school quite a bit. And so I went to school with my dad at the courthouse and learned about the world of 60 Center Street. And soon I was sitting in the back rooms with our justices there, asking them questions and telling them my opinions about how I might settle cases. And they used to say to my dad when I was about 8 years old, Freddie, save your money. She's going to be a judge. And of course, that's before they had mediators. So it was really a love at a very early age. I realized my love of understanding conflict and always wanting to know more about a conflict in order to resolve it. Yeah.
Wow, so you were 8 years old. I'm just picturing little Michelle. And for those of you who are not from New York, that's a courthouse. And there's a little Michelle, curious with her dad, and you must have been a pretty spunky little girl.
I definitely was, Denisa. I always was very curious and asked a lot of questions, and I loved the justices, and they were very wise and kind with me. And it became an ongoing visit because they were always so welcoming. And that was really the first mentoring I ever received with the justices. My dad was at the appellate division for a bit, and then they used to tell my dad I would be an appellate division judge. But the point is that I knew, as you're saying, that I loved the law. I loved resolving problems and sitting in settlement conferences. Didn't exactly know, what that meant, what that was going to look like for me at all in the future. But I did tap into a passion thanks to my dad and, the wonderful people at the courthouse. Yeah.
So fast forward, you
And
became
I have a
an
picture of
attorney.
my dad. I want to, there's my dad.
Oh,
And so he was a
oh
clerk at
wow.
60. And yeah, I always,
Well,
he's passed, but he certainly was a mentor to a lot of people. Many people know the first mediator at 60 Center was Mike McAllister, who then on went to Jams. But what people don't know was that Mike McAllister was my dad's court officer, and my dad used to encourage him because he was settling cases as a court officer in the hallways, and my dad encouraged him to go to law school, which he did. And then he became the first real settlement person at the court, and he ended up going to Jams. And he used to say to me, Michelle, you're going to be the first mediator at the court, which, ultimately came true. Yeah.
yeah, well, tell me about that. So fast forward,
Yeah. So
what was that?
the judges would encourage different internships. I worked for Phil Damashek's office, which was a very accomplished personal injury firm for quite some time when I was in college. And then at 24 years old, I started at the courthouse writing legal opinions. And soon they had me in the hallways settling housing disputes. And early on, I spoke with the administrative judge that if you really want to get settlements of not only the motion, but the entire case, I could do that for you, but we need to give people their dignity. And we have to call in all the clients in the case, everyone involved with the attorneys, and have a comfortable, private, confidential place for people to sit down so they could really tap in to a sense of self-determination in a respectful environment, not just in a hallway making quick settlements that may or may not really stand. So that started to happen in the early 90s, where I was given jury rooms to sit in and work, invite clients in, not just the attorneys in settlement conferences, but I was invited to invite clients in. And then soon I was given my own chambers to when to settle the cases when the volume became too great. And it was a real think tank because it started with housing cases, and then it then went on to matrimonial cases. But then we started to get a lot of employment discrimination cases, and the administrative judge would see if those could settle in mediation, and that was in the 90s, and they did. And so on and so forth. The program expanded. And the great thing about the program is that very early on, I started inviting law schools to refer their law students to us to get an
Mm,
opportunity to observe. And so at the time I retired this year, I had over 150 law students through the program,
wow.
and
You
which
know
which
what's
is
amazing?
really wonderful. And I learned probably more from them than they learned from me. You know, they were always so interesting, and there were international students as well. It's great.
You know what's amazing is you are like you take your dad's legacy that started at an earlier age. Essentially, you carried it through, and then I've heard you use the word respectful. And I know it used to be traditional litigation, basically, where if you wanted a divorce, you needed to duke it out. You each hire a lawyer, basically, at hopes to either settle or it went to trial. And then with the birth of mediation, there is another option. It's a generally healthier option, if it makes sense, and for people to achieve out of court resolution. And so you continue that, and so you're still, and then so it was your dad, and then you starting or sort of formalizing this program, and then passing it on and mentoring law students, teaching them about sort of this alternative way to resolve conflict. You've also shared with me that somewhere there you had a family, and I don't know, it was the demands of your work, but you almost considered quitting your career when you had kids. What was that like?
Well, thank you for that question. Very insightful, Denisa, and very accurate. Yes. When I was in my early 30s, I started to have my children. I had my daughter Ariana, who was the first mediation program law student that we had, and my son Maxim, who also helped out at the program. And it was there was no part-time at the time, and so I was ready to submit my resignation to the court, and they were so graceful and so wonderful to me. They talked to me about job sharing, and I wasn't even sure what that would look like in my capacity in the law department and all the cases I was working with, and they helped me to figure out a way to share my time with another court attorney. And I was able
Mm,
to save my career while having the meaningful um, mothering opportunity that I had up in Katona where I live. So it was really a dream come true to share my job, with someone else, and really have the best of both worlds. I did that for 15 years, and I was the first job share that they created for me, and that was in 1994. So yeah, a lot of gratitude in my life, in my career, and it was I would, it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to parent my children in a meaningful way, the way I wanted to. Of course, now with remote, uh, you know, uh, many more people have opportunities to continue their careers while at home, but that was not the way it was back in the early 90s in the career. Yeah.
You know what is really great is you're probably, I don't know, maybe I've had 3 or 4 dynamic women who, they asked. They asked and
Yes.
it was granted to them like, "This is important to me. I want to take, either it's a 1 day a week off, and I will manage to get my work done in, 4-day week." Um, or there's just there are more and more examples, and it's really wonderful to hear. It's not that it was not available. It's just sometimes you just needed to ask, and because it was important to
Yeah.
you, and to
You're
be,
right, Denise.
to spend that quality time. You mentioned the word gratitude. You mentioned the word respectful, and that sort of dovetails with your passion. In yoga. I know you
Hmm.
are a certified yoga instructor, and I love yoga as well. So I certainly appreciate that. Tell me, how has that? How you had an actually interesting story. I think you were teaching yoga at the courthouse. You told
Yes.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that-
Well, again, for me, it's always a crossroad. So, when I turned 30, it was a crossroad. I definitely chose continuing with my family over my career. And then, when I approached the court, they created this wonderful opportunity. And then I was at another crossroads, even doing the time share, the work share with another attorney became very stressful because it felt like doing 2 jobs, and that was very stressful for me, and so I started to search for a way to create work-life balance, and I found it in yoga. Yoga taught me how to create a space for stillness and really tapping in to myself, and when I would feel overwhelmed, giving myself permission to have that space just for myself, not being a mom, not being a court attorney, but just simply being. And it gave me so much more joy. And what I realized that I was able to pay that forward, not only to my family, but also to the clients who I was working with at the courthouse, because I found when I tapped into my feelings and I was very self aware, I was even more acutely aware of what was going on in the room in a sometimes very intense mediations. Yeah.
creating that space, there's something to it, is becoming aware that this is really not your conflict, that maybe it is hitting something, maybe it is triggering you. But I think by bringing that awareness and being able to separate in that moment, going, okay, I'm noticing, but that's not mine. Maybe I'll address why it's hitting me later, but now I'm able to be fully present with my clients, and just focus on that, almost like you're able to lean into what there is in front of you, and that must have made you so much more effective in mediation.
No, it definitely did, and speaking about leaning into, I did stand up on the court bench and literally lean into, the court and, many of the judges by helping them with yoga, because as part of my certification, I had to train, I had to work with some lawyers or, people in my workplace. And so I would work one on one until too many people would be coming into my office on my lunch hour. And the administrative judge offered up her chambers during lunch hour. And I would stand on the bench and I would have a regular group of 12 judges and lawyers, court officers, court reporters who would come in once a month. And as service, I did that for 8 years. And then I would go throughout the state in the judicial conferences training as well. And in addition, I worked at a local hospital here with cancer patients as service. Working with them with yoga and breathing exercises. So it's something that has really sustained me, and I believe it has helped sustain the clients who I work with. Whether I'm working in the public sector, at the court,
Yeah.
or now in my own business, I believe that the yoga is always a presence to support me. And at some point, I came up with the acronym called RAISE, which is a roadmap to help people going through a conflict, whether it's divorce or any other subject area, begin to recognize what truly is their interests in the
Mm.
conflict beyond the litigation. And um and then I use that same acronym raise and called it raise within to help the clients tap into their own feelings while they're in the conflict. And I do that myself, practicing raise within, um yeah, to help me prepare.
Mm. That is really courageous. And I'll tell you why, because too, when you have two emotionally charged people, emotionally laden situation, it's usually the fear of unknown. And instead of leaning away, right? It's almost like in many respects litigation is easier because they are both represented by their respective lawyers and you don't have to deal with both of them together. But what you're saying is, they are in the midst of their own emotional turmoil and you're able to help them become aware of their feelings. So while many people shy away from it, you're leaning into it. um, you
That's
also shared with
absolutely true,
me.
and it applies to the attorneys too, because at the end, I'll
Yes.
have tissues, I have chocolates, and, the attorneys will say, "I look
Yeah.
forward to your mediations, Michelle, because I'm able to breathe and relax and, even, breathe, the incense that you have, and I'm able to have much more clarity when I'm working in the mediation with my clients." So, yeah,
Mm. You're right. You cannot forget the practitioners, which is why
that's right.
I've been doing this podcast is to also help people realize, how much you have to carry. There's so many layers and really to guide
I love
people in
that.
conflict. It takes a very, strong, you need a strong support. Now you've shared with me that National Geographic featured you in a reality show that
Mhm.
took you to India. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah,
Tell
I
me
just
about
wanna
that.
say I love how you just noted so many layers, because so many times, as you said, Denisa, it's not addressed in the litigation that there's not just two sides. There's also the conflict, and that takes on a life of its own. Many time I'm working with maybe 8 people in the room, and it could be a gas explosion, some kind of premises liability or
Oh,
building collapse. And, everybody has their own layers. The clients have the layers, their attorneys, their interaction is
oh,
multi-layered. And then it's the entire dispute. So the fact that
yeah.
you're giving voice to that, I think, is really important. That you see it as layers, not just one pointed argument. Yeah, and so with Worlds Apart, it was my husband, Floyd Rappy, is a graphic artist, and he has his own design studio. And National Geographic reached out to him and asked if heard about his family, and so National Geographic flew to Katona, where we lived, when they decided to have a reality show where they would take an American family to a remote location somewhere in the world and expose them to another culture. And so we weren't told where we would go. We ended up going to 3 hours west of Rajasthan in India. And it was a wonderful, immersive experience for my husband and the kids and myself. They spent hours at the courthouse taping me in the court as a lawyer. And then and my husband in his capacity, and the kids, and then in Rajasthan, and the sense of community and collaboration we felt in this remote village, in this home of 22 people, where we didn't speak the same language. There was no running water, there was no
Wow.
electricity, and still we found a way not only to connect, but have joy and celebrate. We were dancing into the night, and they taught, my daughter and I, learned to cook, and we went into the village on camels. We would sew. My son played soccer, and connected with all the other kids. And my daughter was milking goats, and my husband's an artist. He was painting everyone, and having, speaking with them and painting with them. And it was just joy. I'm still friends with the mom, and it was really her aunts and grandmas who taught me everything, and it was wonderful. Thank you.
Wow, that is that is truly, truly, truly eye-opening, inspiring, and as you said, immersive. What a way to really immerse yourself in someone's culture, circumstances, and being a first generation immigrant and also having spent
Right.
4 years in China, which is completely separate as a young girl, it stays with
Wow.
you.
I'm
So
gonna have
that's
to interview you, Denisa, for
yeah.
the next one. You have a really interesting history.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, and I'm really thankful for that. So
Wow.
on a light and final note, how would your kids describe you?
Oh my goodness. I would say, definitely spunky, as you used at the beginning, and curious and compassionate, and mm, I would say, yeah, I would say maybe definitely full of life. They love, they say, you're always there to connect with others and be so compassionate with others and bring out the life in others and make people feel, very comfortable in our home, or if we're in someone else's home, bringing joy into situations. So that's the way they always would describe me. But they're great kids, and I'm very blessed with wonderful children, parents, my wonderful husband, who I am together with since I'm 15 years old. And I always say to him, which is true, he is the true inspiration in the family. He's a wonderful person. Oh yeah.
Well, you see, you just opened it up for part two because there's so
Yeah,
much.
he's
So
he's
much
more interesting than I am, right?
no, no, we just scratched the surface. As a matter of fact, that is an interesting idea. I'm interviewing a couple tomorrow night, so
Oh,
that's
I love that. Good for you.
we're heading in that direction. Um, Michelle, it's been terrific, to have you and to really reveal this vivid, I would say, tapestry of diverse experience that you've had, and how you see almost seamlessly like blend the world of law and yoga and even being immersed in a culture in another country's culture. It's absolutely inspiring, and thank you so much for being here today.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for this invitation.
And for our viewers and listeners, to learn more about Michele Kern-Rappy, check out her bio link in the description below. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Beyond the Bar Podcast. Follow us on all social media links. We want to hear from you. Place your comments. And until next time, stay curious and stay inspired.